Can a village stuck between two warring factions of monsters survive? And just what does go on in a normal day in the tomb of Nazarick? Hello everybody and welcome to another light novel review. I'm Justus Stone and my channel is completely dedicated to light novels, reviews, news. The Light Novel Podcast is posted here, and I also take a look at the more popular titles in Japan. So if you love light novels or maybe you're just starting to get interested in them, you should consider subscribing. In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing volume number 8 of Kugane Maruyama's light novel series, Overlord. This one is released officially in English by Yen On. If you want to pick up your own copy, I do have links to Amazon and the book depository in the description down below. Now, volume number 8 is basically split into two parts. The first half, well, it's a little more than half of the novel, is focusing on the village of Karn, or Karne. I haven't watched the anime, so I'm not exactly sure on the pronunciations of some of these things. In any case, it is the village that Ainz saved way back in volume number 1, the one where the alchemist Nefire and his grandmother have chosen to settle, and where the girl that Nefire is in love with, Enri, lives. She's also the girl that summoned a bunch of goblins with the magical horn that Ainz gave her. So this village has lots of connections to the various volumes of Overlord. And pretty much what we do is we focus on this village as they are starting to grow and they are starting to accept the goblins into their fold as protectors and helpers. And it also takes a look at the situation that the village now finds itself in, where because Ainz has taken Hamosuke, the wise king of the forest, away, there's sort of a power vacuum that's been created in the forest between different factions of monsters. There's a monster faction of the east and of the west, and they're kind of at war with each other, and there is fear that it could spill out of the forest and eventually involve the village. And so we have this sort of first volume just kind of taking a look at the general idea of how is the village building its defenses, how are the goblins being incorporated into the village, and it really focuses a whole lot on the character of Enri and how she is really moving away from being just the village girl, the simple village girl that Ainz saved back in volume 1, to becoming a very capable and confident leader of the village in this volume. In the second half of this book, we have basically a day in the tomb of Nazarick. It focuses on a whole bunch of different elements. One of sort of the running lines throughout it all is Ainz has decided that in order to boost some morale and get everybody sort of closer together, he wants to invite all of the male guardians to just have a soak in the Nazarick tub. Well, I mean, it's like basically a full-on hot springs area, that public bath that, of course, Ainz and his clan created. I mean, they're Japanese. Of course they created like a massive public bath in Nazarick. I mean, it makes complete sense. And so Ainz thinks, you know what, this is going to be a good way to kind of have everyone relax and kind of team build. He's really kind of adopting that whole mentality, bringing that over from his human life. And so in this second story in this book, we have sort of that aspect of it. It's almost oddly like a slice of life, but for monsters and demons. And yeah, it's kind of a funny story, but it has a lot more humor elements to it. It also has a lot more of a world building aspect to it, also giving us sort of more insight into maybe what Ainz's sort of end goal is going to be for this campaign of his that he is slowly sort of letting go wild, particularly given how volume 7 ended on the cliffhanger. Now let's be really frank and honest about this. This book is not bad. In fact, I liked it. In fact, it's still better than some light novels. But as an Overlord novel, it really failed to grab me the way so many of the other volumes have. And I really think that's my own problem. I'm not saying that I think that's a fault of the book necessarily, but because of how this novel is structured. In other Overlord volumes where it has sort of shifted the focus away from Nazarick, it has still done enough to involve Nazarick in the story that we feel the presence of Nazarick, that there's still, like, particularly when I'm thinking about the city arc, I mean, we still had Sebas's arc kind of happening alongside, concurrently, and even, you know, him eventually becoming involved with the human characters that we were sort of seeing develop away from the other denizens of Nazarick. It never felt like Nazarick was really out of the picture. And in this volume, for the first 130 so pages, you really don't get a whole lot of Nazarick. There's like one maid who shows up really just here and there, and there's one point where Henry runs into Momon. But that's it. And I found it a little hard to get into. And I think part of it is because as much as we enjoy world building, at least, I mean, I enjoy world building, and I know many of you do as well. As much as we enjoy world building, this one felt like almost 300 pages, a single entire novel of world building. That's what it really felt like to me. And I'm not going to say that that's necessarily a bad thing when this is a longer running series, but it failed to grab me. You know, when you finish volume 7 and you're left with that cliffhanger, and then all of a sudden you walk into this book and it just seems very disjoint and, you know, separate from the main storyline, and you kind of just feel like it's sort of like a big speed bump in the road. And again, this is my opinion, obviously. This is my feeling of it as a reader, but you know, like, this is the kind of volume that would be great to read between arcs. That, you know, I think that's probably what I would say, because that's usually where we get a book like this, right? You know, you finish a big, huge arc, and then you have that sort of short story volume just to kind of cool down, and maybe it'll introduce a few new ideas that'll come up in the next arc or something like that. But overall, you're kind of like, yeah, it's the breather volume. It's the, okay, things have been really ratcheted up and height and everything else, and now we're just going to kind of cool out, take a breath, reset things, and then carry on. This book is right smack dab in the middle of the arc. It's right smack dab in the middle where, like, really we were getting to the probably the biggest, most epic part of the whole thing. So when I start reading it, and it's like, in the village where the goblins lived alongside of humans. And this isn't actually how the book opens, but I mean, that's the feeling of it, right? You know, we'll hear the birds chirping and the smiling people working in their fields, and you're kind of like, where's the dragons? Where's the dead knights and the destruction? And it just, for me, it was hard to get into, you know, because I knew that this was that book. I knew that it wasn't a continuation of Volume 7. I knew that it was kind of like that bump in the road before we moved forward. You know, and so I kind of knew that, which is partly why I've put reading this off for so long. In fact, Volume 9 is coming out this month, in fact, just in like another week or so. So I put this off for a long time, and then it's taken me longer to read this than I think any other light novel, well, certainly longer than any other Overlord volume. And again, I think it's just my personal hang-up that I was a little bitter at the book because I thought, man, I just want to read the good part. Where's the good part? However, that said, that again, that's my own personal gripe. But that said, is the book trash? Well, no, I said that already. I don't think it was. You know, obviously, there are elements in this book, which I mentioned earlier, that you're starting to get an idea in this volume of where Ainz's end goal is. What is his end game? Well, we're starting to see that. We're starting to see how he is making use of this village that he has saved, and how he is also making use of the people that he has conquered, like the lizard men. Even Hamusuke, we get more of an idea about what his sort of ideas are for Hamusuke and what he wants Hamusuke to be able to accomplish. So you get a lot more, like I said, it's world building. It's world building. It's doing more to sort of give you insight into the end game of what's going on. but it's also just, like I said, a bit of comedy. I found a lot more comedy in this volume than I would say has happened in much of the other books. You know, just even the fact that it took time to say how Ainz bathes himself because of how difficult it is, because he's a skeleton and he has these all sorts of holes and bits and weird hard places to reach, and like I said, it just, there's parts of it where I just was like, wow, this just doesn't really feel like the Overlord novels that I just read, like at least the last 3 volumes. It feels so different. But that said, you get into this second part, and while there is a lot more comedy and we're seeing the denizens of Nazarick in a lot more of this comedic kind of light, there are certain things that are said and done that you're like, wow, there's still quite a lot of dark things going on in the Tomb of Nazarick. And even the way that the second story kind of ties into the first, which I did appreciate. It actually made me like the first part of the book even more, I think, was when you get the reveal of everything that's kind of going on behind the scenes. It makes the book feel a lot more complete and makes it make a lot more sense in my mind. And when you realize just what's going on and why the village has found itself in the situation it does and everything else, like, again, it introduces that whole other level of dark gray, you know, Ainz kind of treading that real in-between spot between benevolence, evil, dictator, overlord, you know, like, and as I said, I've always liked that aspect of this series, and so I think that's why once I got to sort of the second half of the book and it was focusing far more on Nazarick, I got a lot more into it. And as I said, you know, things get revealed about the first story in the second half, it kind of made things make more sense and got me more interest and everything else. So I think the moral of my story here is that I really like the characters in Nazarick. Like, I really like the Nazarick characters. And when they're not around, I kind of am not as invested in the series. And as much as I don't mind that first half, as much as I don't mind getting to know other characters, I liked it better the way it was done in other books, where there was still bits of Nazarick sort of interspersed so that it still gave you that nice Nazarick bit without you kind of feeling like I'm reading about characters that are not even secondary characters in my mind of this series. But again, you know what? If you've really loved Overlord overall and you don't mind the slowdown of the pace quite a lot, and you want to have more world building for a little while, maybe take a break from everything that's been going on, it's a great volume. It's not a problem that way. I'm kind of curious when I read volume number 9. I'm kind of curious to see just if there are things that in this book play out at all in volume number 9. Because here's what I'm going to say. To me, if volume 9 really has nothing to do with this book, if this book really, you don't need to read this book at all to get volume number 9, I would highly recommend reading volume 7, then volume 9, and then read this book. that is, I think that's kind of, even if you read, like, finished volume 6 and then read this one, then read 7 and 9 together, I'm kind of wondering, because I believe that's how the anime did it. If I do recall, that's exactly how the anime did it. They did the volume 8 stuff first, and then they did the volume 7 and 9, and, like, you know, so that the storyline carried over, so you didn't have that break in the flow of the story. So, again, not a bad volume. In my opinion, kind of misplaced in terms of its order within the story. Kind of felt like not the Overlord novel that I wanted right now, even though I don't dislike it. As I said, I think I would have preferred it if this was volume 9 and volume 9 was volume 8. I think that would have been better for me, but again, maybe I'll read volume 9 and be like, thank goodness I read volume 8 first, because there's some stuff in there that's important. I don't know. I won't know until I review it, but I will definitely review it because, well, you all know that I really, really like this series. So yeah, volume number 8 of Overlord. A little bit mixed feelings about it. You know, not a bad volume, but I just kind of feel like it was the wrong time or wrong space for this book to occupy in the Overlord storyline. For my next review, I'm going to be continuing another series that I've been really enjoying, and that is the Monogatari series, this being Oni Monogatari, and that will be my next review. If you're brand new here, hit that subscribe. If you like this video, give it a like. Thank you so much for joining me in this review. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Till then, bye-bye for now.